Let's go ahead and pray, and then we'll begin our topic for this hour. Lord, thank you so much for the clarity of your word and the opportunity to research it, to think about it, to ponder it, and it changing our perspective, it freeing us really from our thoughts and our traditions that we erect, thinking that you teach them, but you don't. May this be a lesson that gives a little clarity, that causes us to wonder, to think, and to think critically. And may it be of use and benefit to all of us for your acknowledgement and your glory. For it's in your Son's name. Amen. Well, I thought it necessary, like I said, I issue an apology, but not really, because this is one that I probably will get on my soapbox if you don't stop me. Okay. This is near and dear to me because in the world of counseling biblically, this is a huge topic. Even in those who are not involved in that particular area or they're involved in counseling, I'm sure that you have come across this teaching or some of the statements that have been made concerning this topic. And so I think it would be good again to warrant a discussion and an examination of the biblical text concerning this issue. So let's go ahead and jump in. Greater evangelical Christianity has seemed to underscore this doctrine. If you jump onto the internet for any length of time, you'll see authors and individuals talking about this, spilling great ink and computer programs to explore this. Greater evangelical Christianity has seemed to underscore this doctrine in light of the sanctification of the believer. Okay. According to some, that is some authors and people who write about this, this is perhaps the biggest problem, according to them. Okay, now I'm not saying that it is, but according to them, that this is the biggest problem that a Christian supposedly faces in their life is the adoption of idols. Okay. I'm going to, I want to issue a couple of questions. I do this all the time to kind of set the tempo here. How does the word and the concept of idolatry is defined by greater evangelical Christianity? Now, I'm not saying that I subscribe to this view. I'm just going to tell you flat out I don't. But I think it's important that if we're going to scrutinize anything, that we give it a fair hearing, at least. All right. Let's take a look at how individuals in greater Christianity describe what idolatry is. Okay. Wilson J. in his article describes, and again, these are individuals that are, again, very prominent. He describes it as this: all sin is idolatry, because every sin is an exercise in trust of something or someone other than the one true God to satisfy, fulfill, or bless. That's how he would describe idolatry, right? That all sin is idolatry, right? Now, is all sin idolatry? I know that idolatry is a sin, but is all sin idolatry? His description is trust or confidence, assurance of something or someone other than the one true God, okay? To satisfy, fulfill, or bless. This individual describes idolatry in this manner, very similar to the one that we just looked at. He said, before looking at the specific idol in question, we need a refresher on idolatry. We commit idolatry when we put anyone or anything in place of God, including a mental image of God that does not align with Scripture. Anything? Anyone? How do you put anything in place of God? So he defines idolatry this way. Let's go back to this one. Idolatry, all sin is idolatry according to this individual. And this individual describes it as anything or anyone we put in place of God. We substitute God for this individual or anything. That means any concept, not just any person, any concept too. Okay. Let's take a look at another individual. This goes by the name of Mr. Matera. He writes this concerning idolatry. He says, idolatry is when we violate the first of the 10 commandments, which is, you shall have no other gods before me. Idolatry is when we put something or someone first in our lives before the living and true God. Idolatry is the root cause of all other sins, which is why the first 2 commandments deal with this. Interesting. So according to this individual, it is when we put something or someone first in our lives before the living and true God. He says idolatry is the root cause. It is the source of all other sins. Really? And then he mentions, of course, the 10 commandments, which there's more than 10. But, you get the picture. Right? So looking at these explanations of what idolatry is, let's look at the main points. According to these explanations, one is when people put their trust or their assurance in something other than God to satisfy or bless them. According to one writer, when they commit or devote themselves to anything or anyone other than God. Okay, that was the other gentleman's explanation. And it is associated with the violation of the 10 commandments. I do have a question for us, though, now that we've kind of looked at a little bit of the explanations here. There are certainly more of them, but they're very consistent, essentially. They kind of run along the same lines. We just kind of be repeating the same thing here. It's either putting your trust or confidence in something other than God, or putting something above God, or putting something before God, or on the pedestal of God's, or on God's pedestal, or whatever the case is, right? And he usually refers to a mental exercise, and it's not even a person or a concept, okay? So we have another question. So based on these points, what can become an idol? I mean, there's a lot of things that we think about, right? A lot of things on our minds. If I put my wife first, have I made her an idol? If I put her needs first, could somebody say, well, you're putting your needs before God and therefore she's an idol? Is that possible? Is that biblical? How about this? Let's take a look here. First of all, the person that we just read is that sin could be an idol, right? All sin is idolatry because every sin is an exercise in trust of something or someone other than the one true God to satisfy, fulfill, or bless. We just talked about that, right? Now, idolatry is a sin, but all sin? Interesting. So sin, according to this author, could be an idol. But another author says that church could be an idol. He writes, church can indeed be an idol. It's a sneaky idol. It comes up at you and goes, ha! Right? It's a sneaky idol. Because Jesus loves the church and refers to it as his body of believers. So church, if we're not careful, can be an idol. Okay? Ministry can be an idol. Did you know that? Ministry idolatry. I've never heard of this term. Ministry idol is the unguarded heart of wandering from the Lord of the work to embrace the work of the Lord. Don't you love that turn of phrase? Don't you love it? Brother, you've left the Lord of the work for the work of the Lord. I love it. He says, how does this happen? Ministry idolatry occurs when we delight more in what God is doing through us than what he has done. I don't have time to go into the theological specifics of this. But where is he getting this from? That God is doing through us than what he has done, is doing, and will do in glory. Ministry idolatry. If you're not careful, if you enjoy your ministry a little too much, how about the order of service? Did you know are you idolizing this order of service? 3 hours that you get to spend here on a Sunday, right? Do you love it? I don't know if anybody loves it that much, but if you love it that much, you could have an idol. Worship music can be an idol. Sunday school can be an idol. Programs can be an idol. The pastor can be an idol. That's certainly true, particularly with wealth. I'm just kidding. The building one meets in could be an idol. Could you imagine this? Beth Haven, probably one of the plainest buildings on the corner. The order of service, or an element in the order. Oh, hey, you didn't give us that bulletin. Oh, you want the bulletin? More than you want the Lord. The way we've always done it can be an idol. Really? So me just saying that? This is the way we've always done it. Did you even know that family can be an idol? A hobby, a church, a ministry, a job, a boyfriend or girlfriend. I'm watching for idolatry. A husband or a wife, a brother or a sister, a parent or a child. If you're not careful, your family can be an idol to you. You know, all of these articles that have all of these statements, they have one thing in common. I did not put it in any of these because I was trying to condense it, but there's one particular statement that they all start off with. And that is the statement, anything can become an idol. They say it's all throughout their articles. What I find fascinating is they don't go into the language of what it actually means. And a lot of them will go, well, yeah, we know that an idol was this, but ... I think it's important for us to go into the language, because reading these, we can make ourselves neurotic. You know, we go around smashing idols everywhere, looking for them all the time, when that might not be our focus and our point of attention, because we misunderstand the text. So let's go into the scriptures and look at a couple of verses and explain them and see some of the qualities, right? First of all, let's look at the word idol. Okay, it's the Hebrew word pezel, okay, for idol. This word is used 30 times in the Hebrew scriptures. That's not a lot, particularly from Genesis to Malachi. I mean, that's not a lot of times, just the word idol itself, okay? The root word of this Hebrew word is pasal. This word underscores something that is cut or fashioned into a shape for use. Now, it's not just used for idol. As a matter of fact, it's used, remember when Moses broke the ordinances that were given by God because they were engaging in revelry. Moses broke the first tablets, and then God instructed him to cut out another tablet. That word is pasel, okay? Or pasal, rather. That's the root word, pasal. It means to cut and shape or something for use. The word pasel is translated idol or graven image. So really, an idol is something that is carved or cut or fashioned into. All right? That's what it is. We see this actually, both words that are used, actually pasel and pasal, in Habakkuk, everyone's favorite book. Okay? I mean, it's like one of those books, like if you blink, you'll miss it. It is the minor prophets, or what we call the minor prophets. In Habakkuk chapter 2, chapter 2, verse 18 and following, the prophet discusses, again, some of the practices of Israel and asks them a series of questions. He writes this: what profit is the idol, pasal, that word that we just looked at, when its maker has carved it or cut it, pasal, or an image, a teacher of falsehood? For its maker trusts in his own handiwork when he fashions speechless idols. What interesting statement, right? That the maker itself trusts in what it carves. It believes in that image that it carves, particularly in terms of false deities, okay? False gods. They would carve out the image of these false deities and would either wear them or would put them on their mantelpieces in their homes, on display, would give them shrines. Okay? So pasel is one word that's translated idol, singular in nature. Another word in the Hebrew is the word maseka. Maseka. That sounds like an exotic coffee. Okay, give me a cup of maseka, please. Hold the cream. The word maseka is used 28 times in the Hebrew scriptures. The root word of this word is the word nasak, which means it underscores or emphasizes something that is poured into a mold or casted, okay, into a mold. Think about the nation of Israel during the time that Moses went up to Mount Sinai, and Aaron was there, right? And the group came to Aaron and said, "Hey, where's Moses at?" And Aaron was like, "I don't know," right? And he says, "Well, since he's gone, why don't we create a God who delivered us," right? And they casted a calf, a golden calf, right? This is the practice of maseka, or nasak, really. Okay? So the word maseka is associated with making or creating idols. Okay? As a matter of fact, we see this underscored in Exodus 32. Exodus 32, verses 1 to 4. Exodus 32. I'll start at verse 1. It says, now when the people saw that Moses delayed to come down from the mountain, the people assembled about Aaron and said to him, hey, come, make us a god who will go before us. As for this Moses, the man who brought us up out of the land of Egypt, we don't know what has become of him. They probably thought he died or something because he had been gone for a long time, right? Verse 2, Aaron said to him, well, tear off the gold rings which are in your ears, and your wives and your sons and your daughters, and bring them to me. Then all the people tore off the gold rings which were in their ears and brought them to Aaron. And he took this from their hand and fashioned with it a graving tool and made it into a molten calf. He melted the gold and poured it into a mold to create this calf. Okay? And said with it, this is your God, O Israel, who brought you up out of the land of Egypt. How goofy is that? Right? So molten calf is this word masak, that he took a graving tool, he melted this, he carved this out, and made a calf for them to acknowledge. And basically took this calf and accredited the works of God to this calf. We see the same type of language in 2 Chronicles, okay, concerning Josiah, okay? Josiah, a righteous ruler. 2 Chronicles chapter 34, okay? Second Chronicles chapter 34, verses 1 to 4. I will read for some immediate context here. Okay. Verse 1 of Second Chronicles chapter 34. It says, Josiah was 8 years old when he became king, and he reigned 31 years in Jerusalem. He did right in the sight of the Lord, and walked in the ways of his father David, and did not turn aside to the right or to the left. Verse 3, now in the 8th year of his reign, while he was still a youth, he began to seek the God of his father David. And in the 12th year, he began to purge Judah and Jerusalem of the high places, the Asherim, and the carved images and molten images. Both words used here, carved images, things that were carved out of rock and wood and things like that, and the molten images, the things that were casted with metal and iron and things like that, and placed it all on the high places of Jerusalem. He began to destroy them. He broke into pieces the ground to powder and scattered it on the graves of those who had sacrificed to them. That word, again, molten images, is masak. So far, we've seen in Hebrew that the word idol is something that is made. It is produced, right? It is something that you can visually see, right? That you can point to and go, that's it, right? It is also something that can be physically destroyed as well. Then we have this Hebrew word, teraphim. Teraphim is idolatry, or idols, plural. This word is used 15 times. Again, these words aren't used very frequently, although the theme and the concept of this is all over the scriptures. The root word of this Hebrew word, teraphim, is rapha, which means to heal or to make whole. Okay? We'll talk about that in a little bit. The root word is rapha. Teraphim is the word that we're talking about here. The Hebrew word teraphim instructs idolatry that is usually found in a family's household. So families and groups of individuals who live together, again, would have idols, either on a shrine somewhere in a corner, or they would have them, laying out on a banister somewhere, or something like that. They would be visually seen. And these individuals, these families, the groups that lived there would either bow, or they would acknowledge, or they would pray to, they would petition these idols for certain things, or give thanks or whatever. It's particularly for fertility and produce. Okay. In Genesis 31:19, when it talks about Laban and Rachel and Jacob, Genesis 31. I will start at verse 15 for some immediate context. Actually, I'll start at verse 13. It says, I am the God of Bethel, where you anointed a pillar, where you made a vow to me. Now arise, leave this land, and return to the land of your birth. Rachel and Leah said to him, do we still have a portion, our inheritance in our father's house? Are we not reckoned by him as foreigners? For he sold us and has also entirely consumed our purchase price. Surely all the wealth which God has taken away from our father belongs to us and our children. Now then, do whatever God has said to you. Verse 17, so Jacob arose and put his children and his wives upon camels. And he drove away all of his livestock and all of his property which they had gathered, and acquired livestock which he had gathered in Padam Aram, to go to the land of Canaan for to his father Isaac. So when Laban had gone to shear his flock, then Rachel stole the teraphim that were her father's. Household is not in the text. That's placed there to underscore that these idols were part of Laban's household. Okay, they were getting ready to leave to go because, of course, Rachel was married to Jacob and Leah at this point. So she takes the father's idols and leaves. Well, why would she do that? Because she still had an affection towards them. She still believed them, right? And so she took them, right? Again, notice that they are physical. Okay? She took them, right? This isn't a concept. Okay? She literally took them, and those idols represented, again, the gods that were with Laban in her household. In Ezekiel 21:21, going here, the word teraphim is also used to discuss the practice of Nebuchadnezzar. And Ezekiel, which we will get to sometime this decade, which I'm looking forward to actually going through and studying this along with you all. In Ezekiel chapter 21, we read the following. I will start at verse 14, again for some immediate context here. It says, you therefore, son of man, prophesy and clap your hands together, and let the sword be doubled the third time, the sword for the slain. It is the sword for the great one slain, which surrounds them, that their hearts may melt, and many fall at their gates. I have given the glittering sword. It is made for striking like lightning, and it is wrapped up in readiness for slaughter. Show yourself sharp. Go to the right, set yourself, go to the left, wherever your edge is appointed. I will also clap my hands together, and I will appease my wrath. I, the Lord, have spoken. Verse 18. The word of the Lord came to me, saying, As for you, son of man, make 2 ways for the sword of the king of Babylon to come. Both of them will go out of one land, and make a signpost. Make it at the head of the way to the city. You shall mark a way for the sword to come to Rabbah of the sons of Ammon, and to Judah, and to fortify Jerusalem. Verse 21. For the king of Babylon stands at the parting of the way, at the head of the 2 ways, to use divination. He shakes the arrows. He consults the household idols. He looks at the liver. Remember how we talked about the practices of his court, right? The diviners, the magicians, right? The Chaldeans in chapter 2, and their function, right? Some of them look at entrails. Other ones look at the stars in the sky, right? And they give a fortune to the king, whether he's going to win or whether he's going to lose or whatever the case is. That's what's being described here. In a lot of ways, those representatives, those diviners, those witches, the sorcerers, all of those that Nebuchadnezzar consults, they are all representative of the idols that are found in Babylon. Okay. Let's turn to Isaiah. Isaiah 44. Hey, I keep finding this dollar. One of these days I'm going to take it. I'm just playing. I'm teasing. I would never take from good old Willie B. Isaiah 44. This is an interesting passage here as we look at the Hebrew text. I will start at verse 9. I love this here because this God through Isaiah describes the practice of this individual who is working. He says this in chapter 44, verse 9. Those who fashion a graven image, all of them are useless, and their precious things are of no profit. Even their own witnesses fail to see or know, so that they will be put to shame. Who has fashioned a god or cast an idol to no profit? Behold, all of his companions will be put to shame. For the craftsmen themselves are mere men. Let them all assemble themselves. Let them stand up. Let them tremble. Let them together be put to shame. Verse 12. The man shapes iron into a cutting tool and does his work over the coals, fashioning this thing, fashioning it with hammers and working it with this strong arm. He also gets hungry and his strength fails. He drinks no water and becomes weary. Another shapes wood. He extends a measuring line. He outlines it with red chalk. He works it with planes and outlines it with a compass and makes it like the form of a man, like the beauty of a man, so that it just may sit in his house. Verse 14, surely he cuts cedars for himself and takes a cypress or an oak and raises it for himself among the trees of the forest. He plants a fir and the rain makes it grow. He's a horticulturist. Right? Then it becomes something for man to burn. So the wood grows and he cuts it down for something for him to burn. So he takes one of them, that is one of the wood, and warms himself. He also makes a fire to bake bread. He also makes a god and worships it. He makes it a graven image and falls down before it. Verse 16. Half of it he burns in the fire. Over this half he eats meat and he roasts and is satisfied. He also warms himself and says, I am warm. I have seen the fire. But the rest of the wood, he makes it into a god, his graven image. He falls down before it and worship it. He also prays to it and says, deliver me, for you are my God. They do not know, nor they do not understand, for he has smeared over their eyes so that they cannot see, and their hearts so that they cannot comprehend. No one recalls, nor is there knowledge or understanding to say, well, I've burned half of it into the fire and have baked bread over its coals. I roast meat and eat it. Then I make the rest of it into an abomination. I fall down before a block of wood. He feeds on ashes. A deceived heart has turned him aside, and he cannot deliver himself, nor say, is there not a lie in my right hand? Fascinating text, right? He takes wood and uses a portion of it to eat and warm himself, and then takes the other half and makes an image and bows down to that image and asks that image that he's carved to save him physically. Notice that the idolatry takes place with an object that is fashioned and carved. Okay? These words concerning idols and idolatry in the Hebrew text are related to physical images and that people and kingdoms create. Okay? These words, that is, idol and idolatry, we often miss this, are not only related to the physical images, but the instruction that the idol wants them to fulfill or accomplish. Like give their babies over to the flames and have orgies and things like that. The idol instructs them to live like this. Okay? The idol comes with instructions. Third, they attribute the unique qualities of God that make him God to the idol they recognize. They give the idol transcendent qualities. They make the idol omnipresent. They make the idol all wisdom. They make the idol all powerful. They make the idol the deliverer. It's not just the act of, quote unquote, putting something above God that makes an idol. That idol comes with instruction, doctrine on how to live and what to think, and attributes the qualities of God to itself or to the people who worship that thing or acknowledge that thing or recognize it. I don't know about you, but I have never, ever attributed qualities that are uniquely God's to Tanya. She would probably appreciate it. No, I'm just playing. You're calling me God. Well, thank you. No. She would go, are you out of your mind? No, that's not how this works. Okay? You are voluntarily intellectually disabled if you do this. Okay? How about the word idols in the Greek? Well, there are two words. One of them is the word ideolon. That is translated idols. Just like in the Greeks, in the Hebrew scriptures, it's not frequently used. It's only used 11 times in the Greek scriptures, and the root of this word is idios. This underscores an image or form of some sort. Okay? Just like Pazel, we see Ideon refers to an image or form. The word ideolon, that is translated here, occurs to talk about the image or form of a false god that one acknowledges or recognizes. Okay, we see this in a couple of places. One, again, the book of Acts. As we were going through this on Wednesday, we see this word used. In Acts chapter 7. I'll start at verse 38. This is concerning the account of Stephen. Okay, Stephen is kind of recalling the Israelite history here as an example to kind of strike down those in the Sanhedrin. He writes this. He goes, "This is the one who was in the congregation in the wilderness together with the angel who was speaking to him on Mount Sinai, and who was with our fathers when he received living oracles to pass on to you. Our fathers were unwilling to be obedient to him, but repudiated him, and in their hearts turned back to Egypt." Verse 40, saying to Aaron, "Make for us gods who will go before us." That's interesting. They turn their back to Egypt. How did they do that? They did that by adopting the same practices that God took them out of. What they say, you can take a person out the ghetto, but not the ghetto out the person. That's kind of the idea here, right? Our fathers were unwilling to be obedient to him, but repudiated him, and in their hearts turned back to Egypt, saying to Aaron, "Make for us gods who will go before us. For this Moses who led us out of the land of Egypt, we do not know what happened to him." At that time, they made a calf and brought a sacrifice to the idol, Ideon, and were rejoicing at the works of their hands. But God turned away and delivered them up to serve the host of heaven, as it is written in the book of the prophets, "It was not to me that you offered victims and sacrifices 40 years in the wilderness, was it, O house of Israel?" Because of their activity of bowing down to the physical image and saying that this was a representation of God who delivered them, they were punished for that. In Revelation chapter 9, verse 20, this word is used too, Ideon. After the plagues, that is the first round of them, mankind seems to get a little upset about that. In Revelation chapter 9, verse 20, it says this: "The rest of mankind who were not killed by these plagues did not repent or reconsider of their works of their hands, so as not to worship demons and the idols of gold and of silver and of brass and of stone and of wood, which can neither see nor hear nor walk." Translation: in the future, we're going back to the old ages, guys. Not we won't be here. But the world itself is going to be blasted back to Flintstone era, okay? Where they're carving idols, physical objects. We can even say the conqueror, maybe. And they're going to bow down to these things and attribute the works of God to these things. And of course, we have the ending, because I had to put 1 John in here somewhere. I mean, it's the third hour. Will's going through it, so I figure, 1 John 5:21. "Little children, guard yourselves from the Ideolon," from idols. This is the way that the book ends. John in writing this admonition that they guard themselves from idols. Is he talking about guarding yourself to make sure that you don't put your family above God? Is that what he's talking about? Don't put your boyfriend or girlfriend above. Guard yourself from that. Based upon the usage of the word itself, this is talking about a physical object and the attribution of the character of God to these objects, which were around at the time of John. Let's keep going here. Idolatry is idolatry. This word is used 4 times in the Greek scriptures. It comes from 2 words in Greek, idiolos and latria. Latria is translated service. It's where we get the word liturgy from. Liturgy means service, so the order of service. This is where this word comes from. This word discusses by way of the conduct and the activity concerning the worship the false god demands on those who acknowledge them. Okay? Just real quickly, I'm going to go through these. We see this in 1 Corinthians 10:14, where Paul uses this word idolatria. Therefore, my beloved, flee from idolatry. All the worship of idols, the recognition of idols, all of them. Okay? Of course, Corinth was a hotbed for these, okay? Particularly Aphrodite. In Galatians 5:19, speaking of the works of the flesh, Paul writes this: now the deeds of the flesh are evident. They're obvious. You can see them. We don't have to argue about them. There it is, right? We know it when we see it. Which are the following: immorality, impurity, sensuality, idolatry, idolatria, image service, sorcery, enmity, strife, jealousy, outbursts of anger, disputes, dissensions, factions, envying, drunkenness, carousing, and things like these, of which I forewarned you, just as I forewarned you, that those who practice such things will not inherit the kingdom. Galatians 5. There's another example where this word is used in Colossians 3. This one is of incredible interest to me, because Paul does something that's interesting. He writes this. Now I've translated it, added some things here based upon the language here. He says this: therefore, consider as dead the members of your earthly body to immorality, impurity, to immorality, to impurity, to improper affections, to evil desires, and to greed, which is idolatry. Interesting. Okay? This is the word idolatria. Paul uses this, kind of interesting here. Let's take a look at the word greed, and then we'll finish up here. Plenonexia is the Greek word here in this text that's translated greed. It is used 10 times in the Greek scripture. Okay? And it comes from 2 Greek words: pleon, which means many or much, and echo, which is a preposition meaning to have, to hold, to possess. Okay? So if you put these words together, slam them together, presto, blammo, this word can mean to have or to hold more, to have or to hold more, to accumulate. Okay? To have or to hold more. It would seem that the accumulation of resources and holding them for the sake of holding it, the motivation of, this is not talking about like opening up a savings account, okay? This is talking about accumulating resources for the purpose of the object itself, okay? That's what it's talking about. In one sense, the person serves the resources they're accumulating, okay? That becomes the focus of their perspective, their outlook. We see this in 2 Corinthians, as a matter of fact. It's kind of interesting here. 2 Corinthians, in the context, this is talking about, again, a gift that is given to the need of the churches that are suffering during this time. Paul writes, for it's superfluous for me to write to you about this ministry to the saints. I know your readiness, of which I boast about you, to the Macedonians, namely that Acacia has been prepared since last year, and your zeal has stirred up most of them, which I have sent the brethren, in order that our boasting about you may not be made empty in this case, so that, as I was saying, that you may be prepared. Otherwise, if any Macedonians come with me and find you unprepared, we, not to speak of you, will be put to shame by this confidence. So I thought it necessary to urge the brethren that they would go ahead to you and arrange beforehand your previously promised bountiful gift, so that the same would be ready as a bountiful gift and not affected by holding more. We sent people ahead of you to let you guys know that we're coming for this gift, so that you will not be affected by the withholding of this. By greed, essentially. Ephesians 4:19, concerning, again, the interaction of the believers here. It says, so this I say and affirm together with the Lord, that you will no longer walk as the Gentiles also walk in the futility of their mind, being darkened in their understanding, excluded from the life of God because of their ignorance that is in them, because of the hardness of their heart. And they, having become callous, have given themselves over to sensuality for the practice of every kind of impurity in greediness, in holding more. Okay? Even 2 Peter underscores this, that this is a characteristic of what he underscores in the false prophets. Chapter 2, verses 1-3 of 2 Peter. But false prophets also arose among the people, just as there will be also false teachers among you, who will secretly introduce destructive heresies, even denying the master who bought them, bringing swift destruction upon themselves. Many will follow after their sensuality, and because of them, the way of truth will be maligned. And in their holding more, their greed, they will exploit you with false words. Their judgment from long ago is not idle, and their destruction is not asleep. They're motivated by the object they're holding, they're possessing. Right? Matthew underscores this as well. When it talks about not serving two masters, don't store up for yourselves treasures on earth. Talking again about the perspective of them within the time of Jacob's trouble, that they ought not to hold and keep things for the sake of the object. And then he ends with, no one can serve two masters. How for he will hate the one and love the other. By the way, that word hate is miseo, which is associated when it comes to God with idolatry. It's kind of fascinating. You'll be devoted to one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and wealth. Real quick, back to Colossians 3:5. The word is translated in Greek as estin, which is written present active indicative. It's a statement of reality, statement of fact, third person singular. This is not talking about all of them. Remember how I said all sin is idolatry? That's not true. It's not talking about all of them. It's talking about this one. This is not, which this verb would be written in the plural form, this estin right here. So Paul, using this statement, draws out and specifies which one he's talking about. Okay? Here we go. We're almost done. There are two types of idolatry according to the text. One is false religions from false gods, or a type of idol worship, because they have with them an image of God that is not aligned with the scriptures. Jehovah's Witnesses, false idol. Buddhism, false God, false deity, false practices. Hinduism, false practices. Mormonism, yes, they are worshiping idols. That's true. Roman Catholicism, idolatry. Those who believe in true traditional Roman Catholic doctrine. And greed and coveting is another type of idol, as defined by Paul as the object becomes the thing which the person orders their mind and activity. Those are the only two. That's it. So the explanation of idolatry, anything that you place above God, is not consistent. It preaches well, but it's not biblical. Okay? It's not anything you place above God. Idolatry is false deities and their ordinance of what the false deity demands. It is impossible based upon the text to idolize the church. That's ridiculous. Okay? Church practices, family, career, work. Okay, now there could be some bad philosophy associated with that, but it's not idolizing anything. Okay? And of course, idolatry can be associated with the qualities of gathering and accumulating resources for one's own gain, even at the exclusion of another's benefit. Okay? The object becomes the thing in focus. That's it. Thank you for giving me 2 minutes of your time. Let's pray and then we'll close out here. Lord, thank you so much for making your word so clear. And I hope that it offers individual freedom from looking at everything as an idol. We'll make an idol out of anything. But that's not true. Looking at the words and how they are consistently used within the context of the text, it's really about attributing your works and your nature to you and you alone, and not to anything or anyone else. Thank you again so much for your instruction and how your word brings us clarity in this area. For it's in your son's name. Amen.